I'm asking you to make a donation right now to help flip Georgia and the Senate. Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff need our help more than ever before to win these critical runoff elections in Georgia that will determine control of the Senate. We know that these races will come down to a few thousand votes, so we need every resource we can get in order to drive a historic grassroots voter turnout effort in Georgia. This is a rare opportunity to win 2 Senate seats, but I need you in this fight in order to get it done. So please make a donation to flip Georgia and the Senate.
All right. All right, so this is Founder Laerun, and I am here to help you with Fantasy Grounds Unity. We will touch on a little bit to do with with Classic. So if you guys are, wanting tips on Classic, we can talk about it a little bit, but it's mostly Unity. There's a few disclaimers that I need to make right off the bat. One of them is, first of all, this is mainly for PCs. If you're using Unix or Apple Macs or anything like that, this probably won't help much. Some of the computing practices will, but as far as networking and such like that, I don't think it's going to help much. The other thing is that this is not a professional opinion. I am not a certified Microsoft networking engineer. This is also not official help from Fantasy Grounds LLC Smiteworks. So this is my personal opinion. These are based off of experience. These are based off of community involvement. And these are based off of our questions and troubleshooting that we get commonly in our Ask the Expert section in Fantasy Grounds College. So if you're interested in helping our college, or if you have questions, or maybe you're having trouble, the description for our community on how to join our Discord is in the links. I also put our disclaimer in there. And I have a helpful link to one article that we wrote that pertains mostly to Classic, or if you're going to connect via a LAN connection, which would be like peer-to-peer style, which is what the old system used. Unity still can use the peer-to-peer model, but I think the cloud networking will eventually take over. So we're going to kind of hop right into this. If there's any preliminary questions or any concerns or anything like that, let me know. I'll take a peek at the stream once in a while. Hopefully I have some support here. Some of our guys from the community Fantasy Grounds may want to jump in occasionally if I'm doing something wrong. But for the most part, we're going to talk about some basic computing things that most people, I don't know if they realize it or if they're just new and ignorant. I don't know what the problem is, but from what I can tell, there's a misunderstanding about how networking works in regards to Fantasy Grounds. And I'm hoping to clear some of that up. I'm not saying we're going to cover every little problem or every angle, but I'm hoping that some of these things will open your eyes and your mind to the types of problems or the potential of problems if you are not aware of things. So I'm going to go over some of that, and we're going to be talking mostly about wireless versus the network connection. And we're going to talk about some specifics to Unity and some basic networking troubleshooting ideas and some things to keep in mind. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the peer-to-peer. So if you have any questions or comments or complaints or whatever, just leave them in the comments or come on into the college and get clarified if you need to. By no means was this meant to make more work for people. This is supposed to help general users out. And it also would help some of us to remember some of these issues, because when people come in and we find a solution for them, there obviously isn't a database to record all of the solutions. So without having a place to collect all that, I'm sure Smiteworks has their own, but I don't see a published list of troubleshooting or things to try. However, that's a liability issue. So when I speak about this here, I am also thinking of liability. So anything I say or do here does not necessarily mean you have to do it. And if you do and it screws up your computer, I am not going to be the one to blame for it. These are just suggestions. You don't have to do them. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm just using this out of frustration with the amount of questions that are asked over and over again, and then also the fact that a lot of us are not aware of some certain common or somewhat common networking things. So I'm not here to teach you how to use your computer or tell you what to do, but I am here to share you with some knowledge that I've collected over the months and years. So that's the main thing of this is the topic is going to be regarding the connectivity to Fantasy Grounds with a computer running a Windows version. So if you're using Mac or Unix, sorry, this is not covering that. I'm not aware of how to do it. If somebody out there knows what they're doing, if they want to do a show, that's fine. Anyway, so let's get into it. So I did all my disclaimers. The first thing I want to talk about is some common problems that people are not aware of. And when I say people, I'm talking about the end users, even some of us people that think we know it all. There's some stuff in here that we probably forget or that we don't know about. So the first thing is, and I am very, very strong about this, and a lot of people disagree with me, and I'm fine with that because I don't mind being wrong about this. But wireless connections do not hold up to a consistent flow of data. One day it will work, the other day it won't, and it drives me bananas. So with that said, my biggest complaint about end users, and as myself even, is when you use a wireless device, especially if you're the host or the game master or you're the one holding all the books, you are putting the whole campaign at risk with the potential that the network is going to fail at some point. Now, I have really good bandwidth, and I have Comcast, but it still is not consistent, even when I'm connected to it. So adding a wireless connection to the mix is even worse. It just compounds a bigger problem. So my advice to you, my first thing is try to plug in your device if you are the host. If you're a player, it's not normally as big of a deal, but if you are the host, you're the main person, I would try, if you can, some people don't have that option, I get it, but if you can, try to plug in your device. Bottom line, no argument, that is going to save you a lot of headache in the future and in the short term. I'm not saying do not use wireless. What I'm saying is try not to use it. The other thing is, as a player, if you are the only one who cannot get onto the game or the network, more than likely it has something to do with your side of things. So what that could be is that you're on a wireless device. Right off the bat, if you're on the wireless device and you're having connectivity issues, I would almost suspect 75% of the time that is because of the wireless conditions. You could be having interference. You could have low bandwidth because you got a lot of people doing stuff, whatever the issue is. So this first thing is common causes of bandwidth issues. So we're getting right into the wireless side of things. So bandwidth issues can almost be traced to one of two things, and almost always. These activities always have at least two characteristics, and that would be for large amounts of data and extended duration. Common activities causing bandwidth problems are watching videos from internet, like we're doing now on YouTube, and Netflix, and so on and so forth. Large file transfers between computers that are greater than 100 megs or 500 megabytes, depending on what network you're using. Constant stream of data, like surveillance footages and security cameras if they're tied into your internet network, and downloading files from the internet. All of these can contribute greatly to bandwidth issues in a network and should be done only if there is light network traffic. Large file transfers or data streams with a network should be placed on a separate network in order to avoid bottlenecking to other users. So what this means is if you are online and you're trying to play Fantasy Grounds and your wife is watching videos, your kids are on their video games like their Xbox and their PlayStation, it's probably not going to be a great experience for all of you since you are all sharing the same pool of bandwidth. Now, I'm sure there's ways to optimize that, but in general, most people are not aware of the usage that their local network is using. My children have basically they have an Xbox and they have a PlayStation, and when they're on there, I do notice a significant drop in my usage. And I have 2 kids using it, not just one. And then my wife is using a phone, or maybe she's using a tablet or her laptop. Okay, so those things are commonly what drops your bandwidth down. So you have X amount of bandwidth, and you try to shove a rope through an eye of a needle, and that's what you're getting. So when you're trying to connect to somebody, if your bandwidth is overloaded, you're going to have connectivity issues. And when your computer stops streaming consistently or uploading consistently, you are dropping packets. You're running into times where your upload speed is very low or your download speed. So as the host, upload speed is the most important. So if you are the host, your upload speed matters. So if your upload speed is less than 10, I honestly believe you're going to have a tough time. If it gets any less than like 6 or 7 or 8, I mean, you're really going to be crawling. And that their bandwidth is going to be really, really low. And that makes it hard for you to host games. If you're a player, you probably need more of the download side of things. But nonetheless, that number's really low. That can be a problem too, depending on what's being received and what's being sent. So there's constantly data being sent back and forth. When the line conditions or the bandwidth get worse, so does the lag and the connectivity. So make sure, if you can help it, to plug in your devices. If you have to go get a 15-foot cable, do it. You can go to a used PC store and buy a 20-foot Ethernet cable for like $10. I mean, that's what I had to do on one of my devices. I don't recommend 50-foot cables, but if you have a little bit of distance to clear, it's nice to have a longer network cable. And don't forget, there's different varieties. You have a Cat5 cable, so there's different capacities that the wires carry. So you need to be aware of that as well. But nonetheless, common issues are related to what's happening in your own home. So if your daughter and your son and your wife and yourself are all online at the same time, you can expect a little bit of performance drop depending on what they're doing. So if you're online and watching videos and listening to music and all kinds of other stuff, do not be surprised if you have issues with your networking. I don't know why people don't understand that, but that is just nature of it. There might be a way to boost this or prioritize who gets how much bandwidth based off of a management software where you can allocate X amount of bandwidth to each person in your house, but that takes a little bit more advanced setup. However, in most cases, it is just mainly because you have too many things going on at once, and your network provider, in this case it's Comcast, they do not allot me enough bandwidth. So even if you pay to have a bigger download speed, that does not necessarily mean you have a good upload speed. So keep that in mind, that upload, when you're transmitting data, is what you want. This is also true when you are streaming. So if you're streaming and playing Fantasy Grounds, that could be a problem too. It just depends on how much bandwidth you have to work with. So keep that in mind when you're getting upset. And if you're just a player that can't get on for some reason, more than likely it's something to do with on your side of things. You have to troubleshoot your computer. You have to figure out what's going on. If you're on a wireless device, you can almost assume that it's some sort of bandwidth issue, or your internet service provider might be blocking you. So there's other reasons why this happens. But it can be very annoying when you are trying to play and you're having issues with this. And it's very common. You're not the only one. It is just something, it's just the nature of internet networks. This is not Smiteworks' fault. This is not necessarily your fault. There's really no fault. It's just having an understanding of how this stuff works and why it does and doesn't work. And I still don't have a full understanding of it. I'm just learning. I'm pretty amateur, but I have the idea, the picture in my mind of a railroad track, and you've got 3 trains trying to use the same track. That's basically the best way to put it. And then you have trains going in both directions. So there's another issue. So now what we're going to do is skip down to the next slide here. And here are some things that compare wireless to local area network Ethernet cable. Now, this is not to say that wireless is not good. This is to say that wireless has its uses and times and places, and so do network cables. So we'll go over that right now. So some common problems with connection types regarding bandwidth issues is basically related to how you are interfacing with the internet. So whether you're on a tablet, a phone, a computer, a laptop, maybe you're on a little set-top thing where you're streaming movies, maybe you're on your Xbox. Whatever it is, they all offer a different experience, and they all require different amount of bandwidth. So Wi-Fi is convenient over wired Ethernet cables, and that's why people use it. They don't want to run a 50-foot cable. But Ethernet still offers many significant advantages. You probably won't be connecting to an Ethernet cable to your smartphone anytime soon. But it's usually worth running Ethernet cables to the device to the devices at your home that matter. If you can, gaming and media PCs or consoles or set-top boxes, backup devices, which are like backup drives and stuff, and set-top boxes, which is like your Kodi and Roku and stuff. Those are examples of things that you want to have connected via a network cable. You'll get better results, and you're going to be taking better advantage of what you have. So to help you make the decision, we'll take you on a look at the 3 main advantages of using Ethernet over Wi-Fi. Now, if you don't want to hear this, turn it off. You don't have to. But these are the reasons why, or at least arguments why they might be better. So Ethernet is more reliable. There's just plain faster than Wi-Fi. You can't get around that fact. But the real-world differences are really small. So Wi-Fi has become much quicker than over the last few years. But quicker does not mean wider. So even if you have a faster speed, that does not mean you can have 100 people on. It just means that when you are connected, you have a higher chance of obtaining a given advertised speed. So even if you have the fastest internet, if the other website that you're on is throttled or it's overloaded, it's not going to matter. So if your host is overloaded with people connecting to him, it's not going to matter. It's like you have to wait in line to get into the doorway, regardless of how many people and how big and bad you are. So thanks to new standards like the 802.11ac and the 802.1199, which are standards for connection, they offer speeds of up to a meg per second or 150 megabytes per second, depending on which standard your router or modem uses. Even though it's a maximum speed for all your devices wired to share, you likely will not get those speeds in the real world. So that's the advertised highest range. So you're probably getting at least 25% less or more than their advertised speeds. And that's due to line conditions, software settings, all kinds of things affect that. Wi-Fi has become good enough to handle most of our daily tasks. So daily tasks like checking your email, talking to someone on Facebook, playing a little modem, or not a modem, but a cell phone game. Those sort of things are what Wi-Fi was made for. Messaging people, making Wi-Fi phone calls, those sort of things are more what wireless was for in a given home or a small network. On the other hand, a wired Ethernet connection can theoretically offer up to 10 gigabytes if you have a Cat6 cable. So Cat6 is just an update from Cat5. That's the bandwidth. The exact maximum speed of your Ethernet cable depends on the type of Ethernet cable you're using. However, if the Cat5 cable in common use supports up to 1 gig, and unlike with Wi-Fi, that speed is consistent. So even if it's only up to 1 gig, that's consistent if you're connected. While all that speed is great, you have to keep things in mind that the speed of your internet connection is the bottleneck for activities involving the internet. If your internet speed is significantly lower than whatever type of connection you're using, upping the speed of that connection won't matter that much. That's what I was saying earlier. Ethernet will, however, affect the speed between devices on your network. For example, if you transfer files as fast as possible between two computers in your house, i.e. Ethernet or Wi-Fi, your internet connection isn't involved in this. So it's all up to the maximum speeds that your local network hardware can offer. So that's your router, your little connection station. Like some people have a input output, so they can put more network devices up to a single device. So some examples where local speed might be important. If you have multiple devices that share a backup, an NAS backup server, or a shared drive, the backups will go much faster over an Ethernet cable as opposed to wireless. If you have devices that stream media, like a media server like Plex or Kodi or Roku or whatever, an Ethernet connection will give you considerable boost in streaming quality. If you're curious about the differences in local transfer speed, try to do it with a wire and try to do it wirelessly, and you'll see the speed difference there. So wireless interference and connection reliability is the next topic. So Ethernet offers a more reliable connection than Wi-Fi. It's just that simple. There's less interference. There are less things that can go wrong. Wi-Fi is subject to a lot more interference than a wired connection. So that's like cell phones, microwaves, the old wireless telephones, having a wall in the way. Maybe you have internet on the other side of the house and you're on one corner, and that stuff all adds up. Also, interference from electrical devices or your neighbor's Wi-Fi can also mess up yours. So most Wi-Fi devices for routers have channels. So if all of your neighbors are on the same channel, it is possible that their wireless network can bleed over to yours and cause problems. So all those things contribute to Wi-Fi being less reliable. So if you live in an apartment or a small community trailer park, something like that, or maybe a gated community, everybody in your neighborhood is probably going to be transmitting on the same couple channels. Unless they know what they're doing, they can go in and change the channel. But that is more of an advanced topic, and that requires that you have a working knowledge of getting into your modem or your router. Let's see what else we got. So that's basically some of the interferences that you can run into when you're using wireless devices. The other thing is firewalls and protection software. So what these do is they check your incoming outgoing signal, and they can cause problems when you are connecting with others. So antivirus and firewalls, those probably have a likelihood of either slowing down or actually blocking traffic from coming in. So they're trying to keep your computer safe, but at the same time, it's preventing you from connecting or having a smooth connection to your host or to your friend. So that's the other thing you can consider with that holds true with wireless and non-wireless, is if you have antivirus software or network optimization software or something that throttles or controls your bandwidth, you're going to have issues or significant speed changes. If you're at a hotel or if you're at a university or at work, more than likely you're not going to be able to host the game. And that's because it has to go through their network. Usually there's a gateway. You have to know the settings and the password, or you have to know someone who works in security, or you have to get a VPN, which is a virtual private network. I'm not going to cover that, but that's basically a potential way to tunnel around or under these protocols. But that is a whole nother thing I'm not going to get into. Some people in third world countries or countries that don't have modern internet interface, they have to use VPNs to allow for them to connect outside of their local network. So it's just a matter of time and, a matter of, years going by before their architecture is updated to where everyone else is. So do not get upset if you live in Mexico or somewhere like that. That does not mean your internet's bad. What I'm saying is if you're in a country that is not quite up to date in structure as far as internet goes for the infrastructure, it may take 2 to 10 years to get that to be caught up with the rest of the country. So it just depends on where you live, what type of connection you have, your software settings, your computer, and what you're using to connect to the internet. And that's basically the main things that you have to keep in mind. The other thing is some people just plumb don't know. They don't know how to use the computer very well. That's something that you'll have to get used to if you're one of those people that are not really network savvy. You're probably going to have to up your game a little bit to understand it before you even tackle the connectivity with Fantasy Grounds. So let's take a look at Fantasy Grounds. So here is where, if you're a player, you would join a campaign. Now, this is mainly for people that are playing. So when you join a campaign, and if your GM is playing through the cloud, he's going to give you his username, and then he'll tell you the session in case there's more than one person with a similar name. And then the history up here is from previous things that I had connected to before. And then when the game master tells you his actual GM name, you can type that in here and hit enter or refresh if you don't see the name on here yet. And then you will click on it and then try to start. Sometimes when you start up, it'll say, network issue or whatever. That's when you have to start troubleshooting. Or it'll say retrieving data, which is a good sign. And it will probably ask you for a password if the game master put it on. So as you connect, you'll get another message that says it cannot connect, the password protected. So just get the password and then reconnect and it should be good. If you're still using the old connectivity like you did with Classic, then your game master has to give you the credentials and the IP address, and it's already set the default as 1802. Now that's a whole nother configuration of getting the firewall set up and doing the port forwarding on your router as the game master. So we have an article that is linked in the description on the video. So this is the screen that you'll go to when you want to launch into a game that you're joining. Also talk to your DM about updates. So before you update, make sure everyone else is updated. And if they're not, then you should all be on the same page. Another way to check is over here on the top right where it says Ultimate License and there's a date. So pay attention to that date. You guys should all at least have the same date. The other thing is, like I said, if you're at your house and a bunch of people are online, don't be surprised if you have problems joining. I mean, it's just the way it is. If you're in a fraternity or, like I said, a school or some sort of public place, you may not be able to connect. And if you do, it might be a little slow or buggy. So the next thing is Fantasy Grounds. It offers you a way to connect as or set up a campaign. So if I go to create campaign as a GM, I can come up here and I'm going to put networking on the top here. That's the title. And then I pick the rule set. In this case, it'll be 5e, but it can be whatever rule set you're into. Now the settings here, I always put a password and the game, the chat name. So if you don't want to use your Fantasy Grounds forums name, you can put in your own chat name. And then you will set if it's going to be cloud and private, or if it's going to be public, or if you're going to connect via the LAN, the old way where you have to give out your IP address. Anything like that, that's where the settings are for that. And your IP addresses are here on the bottom. And then you have all these extensions if you want to load those at this point. I wouldn't load too many if I was you. That's just a basic troubleshooting / advice, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So once you hit start, it'll create that session, but you have to tell the players, okay, this is networking, and that's the name of the game, and then you tell them your username. Like in this case, it'd be Laerun, and then you would give them a password and possibly your chat name if you set it up that way. But usually the problem is you'll have 10 people trying to join at once. That's an issue sometimes. And then you'll also get issues where people are not sure why their internet's not working. And then when you talk to them, you find out, oh, you have a wireless device. Okay. And then you get to troubleshooting with them and you go, oh, you have a Mac. I don't know how to do Mac. Or they'll say, hey, I'm using my hotspot on my phone for internet. Okay, those sort of things are important to discuss up front. So if you need help, you say, hey, I'm the player, I'm using Fantasy Grounds, I'm on a PC, this is my network. Don't go in there and say, I can't connect, because nobody's going to know what you're talking about. They're not going to know how to help you, and they're not going to have any clue what problems you're having if they don't know those things up front. So if you need help, state your operating system, state which are using Unity or Classic, are using a Mac or Windows, are you the player or the host? Those are the things you need to say up front. That cuts out all this extra garbage of trying to speculate what's the matter with your computer. I don't know how many times we've gone down that road with someone, and halfway through that conversation, oh, you got a Mac. Oh, well, thanks. I didn't know that. So I don't know how to help someone with a Mac. So it's important that you state that up front. That is just a common courtesy thing. If you are asking for help, please give them the information up front. Don't wait till you're 90% through the troubleshooting, because that's not going to help. That's going to just waste time and make things worse. So the thing that I wanted to also mention was some people believe that if you have internet, you're good to go. Well, that's not always true. Internet comes in different forms, and it comes in different styles. You have the old dial-up stuff still out there, unfortunately, like old fax machines and stuff like that. You have cell phone connectivity, which is better and it's decent, but you're not going to get the amount of bandwidth you need to run a game through your phone. So don't use your phone to tether to a laptop and then trying to connect to someone's thing online. That is not going to work too well. Also, you're not going to use a Chromebook. The Chromebooks are still a little bit out of touch or out of form for running something on fantasy grounds. I'm not saying don't use it, but I advise against it. You're just using basically a tablet, or at least a little bit more powerful tablet. Same thing with tablets. You don't run those fantasy grounds on a tablet. If you do and you get it to work, fine. I don't mind being wrong. But tablets and small little desktop computers like that, they don't work too well. They don't even have the right hardware for that. So if you're able to get it to work, great, you're a genius, because I don't see benefit in that other than mobility. And like I said, if you don't have the bandwidth, it's going to be hard for you to stay connected or hard to update your client, your software, if you don't have the bandwidth. The other thing is, where is your modem or your router in your house? Is it all the way across your house? If that's the case, you're on wireless, your signal is probably about 3/4 to half of what you could be having. So you might want to move closer to your router if you're using wireless. If you need to plug in, get yourself a 15, 20-foot cable and plug it in. I think laptops are probably the second most connected device. So if you have a laptop, make sure it has the specs or the oomph to it to run Fantasy Grounds. And that's true of computers as well. If you don't have enough RAM and video memory and hard drive space, it is very hard on your computer and on the software. So if you're running an old computer and you're playing Fantasy Grounds Unity and it's chugging along, it may be time to update or consider it. I'm not saying go out and buy a new computer. I am saying that if you are used to playing Classic or you assume it's a light Classic, it is not. It actually uses the internet. It refreshes differently. It has a whole different engine under the hood, and that's the Unity engine. So that gives them more flexibility. When I say them, I mean Smiteworks. It gives them more flexibility to expand upon what they already have. And that's one reason they went to Unity. Also, Unity allows you to use more bandwidth locally, and it gives you more memory to use locally. But just because you're able to load a large file does not necessarily mean you want to push that to your players. So what I'm getting at is a huge map, and if you send that over to your players, it's going to give you issues. So that's something you got to be careful with as a host. When you're sending files over the internet, the larger that map is, the more bandwidth it's going to take. You can have a little bit better maps than you did before with Classic. So if you are a Classic user and you go to Unity, it doesn't mean we can send over 1 gigabyte quality maps. That is really hard on networks, especially when it's wireless. So what you want to do is either make it a lower quality or break it up into pieces or find a different version of it that's like a JPEG instead. So try not to use big whopping files for maps. That is a common mistake that newer GMs make. You want to keep it down as much as possible, even though locally you can have a larger file. So you're as good as the weakest link in your network of friends that are playing. So even though you have a good computer, maybe a couple of your friends don't. So if you force a large file on them and they don't have the hardware or the bandwidth, they are going to either crash, disconnect, or take forever to download the file. So be careful with what you're sharing to your players. That is another problem that comes from the DM side of things. So if you have a photo that should display in an 800 by 600 area, why not make the photo closer to that size? You don't need a photo that's 3,000 by 3,000. It's ridiculous. There are recommended sizes, and that is due to bandwidth, not necessarily how much RAM and memory and stuff you have. It's more to do with bandwidth. And without bandwidth, you're not going to be sending and receiving files very easily. So the whole thing is about protecting how much bandwidth you have available to you. Usually the more people, the less bandwidth. So if you're going to be running a game and you're having a lot of trouble with 6 people, try it with 5 or try it with 4, see if that helps. That could reduce some of the drag a little. But if somebody's really having trouble with their internet and they can't connect and they're constantly disconnecting, that person needs to get their stuff figured out and either updated or set up or fine-tuned, whatever it might be. That person needs to have that done. So this is something that you want to do in the first session. So if you start noticing someone having connection issues or somebody that's always constantly disconnecting, that person is going to disrupt your game. You need to find this out before you commit to a weekly game, because you're going to be fighting this the whole time you're playing. So if someone's having computer issues, try to help them out a little bit at the beginning, but once it becomes a chore and it's a daily thing or a weekly thing, it's no longer worth it. And it just makes your other players upset. So try not to do that. So you segment Windows host versus Mac versus Ligament. Is this the only that you are from? Yes. I'm only familiar with that, Banks, because that's all I know about. There's a known difference between Windows host and Mac. I don't think so, but there might be some networking things on the back end that I'm not aware of. I'm sure there's some settings that you may have to mess with when it comes to Linux or Mac hosts. So I'm not positive. I've never worked with them, so that is why I segmented that, because I don't want people saying, well, what about a Mac? I don't know anything about them. So I'm not pretending to know about it. If you know something about it, that's great, but I do not. So this is mainly to cover the majority of the users. I realize there are other people out there who use different devices, different rule sets, that sort of thing. This is more or less just a kind of heads up, just more of an opinion than fact. This would be something that I want people to consider before they host a game, and that they need to get some of these things worked out before they commit to a long-term campaign. If you're having issues with people connecting to you all the time, then maybe there's some setting that you have to fix. I don't know what those are. So that's why I made that decision in the beginning, was that Windows host and Mac host, and it's only because that's what I'm familiar with. So is there a known difference? I doubt it, but I could be wrong. The troubleshooting aspects are the things I wouldn't know about, and where to look in the settings. So on a Windows computer, I know enough to be dangerous, so I can get in there and I can fix that part usually, or at least have an idea what to look for. In a Mac or Linux environment, I don't really know what to look for. So I apologize again if you are a Mac user or somebody that is using Unix. The other thing is, at the time of launch, those two platforms were not fully developed. They're a lot better now, but they were not available during the alpha that I know of. So that's another thing, is most people know Unity at this point from the standpoint of Windows more so than Mac or Linux. And I know Linux is still being tested and worked on, so I apologize for that. So if anybody has any questions or complaints or problems with what I'm saying, that's fine. I don't mind being wrong. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all or try to be correct. But I know the advice that I'm giving is sound. It's not a bunch of BS. And I know that wireless connections are probably the biggest issue that gets in the way of people playing. It allows for easier connectivity, but it also opens up more opportunities for you to have problems, especially when it comes to networking and uploading and downloading data. So just keep that in mind, that Fantasy Grounds is not perfect, but generally it's the end users that are having issues first. I'm not saying that the lobby is perfect, because that was a little messy in the beginning, but it's a lot better now. The other thing is, there's protocols and settings and all kinds of things, like your MOTU settings for receiving data. They might be set too high or too low. There's just all kinds of different settings and things that can break or hinder or even make impossible for you to use a networking platform like virtual tabletop. Also, don't use your cell phone, satellite, stealing your neighbor's, it's not going to work very well. And if it does, it's not going to be very reliable. So that's what I'm mainly trying to get at. And, devices get blocked by walls and, other devices in the way of the signal. You can get people walking around, too many people. It's just a matter of time before you have problems with it. So I think that's about all the ranting and raving I want to do about that particular topic. It's been about 40 minutes. So I'm going to conclude this and do a quick little wrap up and we'll call it good. So the first thing we went over is common issues. So if you're on a wireless device, or even if you're on a wired device, if you're doing all these different things, like watching videos and downloading files and that sort of thing, that's going to cause bandwidth issues for your entire household. The other thing we went over is some reasons why or why not to use Ethernet and Wi-Fi. And I think, honestly, Wi-Fi is good for like tablets and laptops and phones and, little mini games and things like that. But when you want to really step up and play, you need to be plugged in. Like if you have your Xbox One, you want that plugged into an Ethernet cable if you can. And if you have like Fantasy Grounds or some kind of game you play on Steam or whatever, try to play those on your Ethernet cable instead of wirelessly, because you can have a lot of lag and drop signal. The other thing was when you connect to a table, you might get an error which you'll have to troubleshoot. Sometimes when players connect to the table and they close it and they try to go back in, it'll say that you're already connected. You have to give the cloud a minute to purge, sometimes a minute to purge your name. You can restart Fantasy Grounds and then reconnect. But generally that will go away if you give it a little bit. There's been in the past, I think it was worse. There's people complaining that when they got kicked out or when they tried to reconnect, the server was reporting that you were already connected. I'm pretty sure that issue is a lot better now, but just about 2 or 3 months ago, that was a common thing. So sometimes the game master would have to reboot Fantasy Grounds the whole session with all the players too, just to allow for that person to come back in. So that is a troubleshooting tip. The other troubleshooting tip is to reset your router. So if you got a bunch of stuff going on, you're not sure about it, and you know that nobody's doing anything important, I just unplug the power for 5 seconds and wait, and then plug it back in, let it start up, give it about 5 minutes, and then try. Sometimes that will clear your networking issues, and it will also disconnect unneeded devices. So that's another way of doing it. It's kind of a hardcore way of solving that problem, but it can be. Yeah, that's right, Naughty Bits. That's exactly right. So that's basically it. So just remember that to get your networking sorted out before you host a game and your players. So you want to test that they can connect to you. You want to run a couple practice sessions to see if everything's balanced and okay as far as lag goes before you start really committing to a large campaign. Maybe run a couple one-shots. Just protect yourself from a lot of wasted time. Okay, I think I've said enough. So there's a recap. I'm going to call it a day. Happy gaming. Good weekend, everybody. And I will see you around. And this is Fantasy Grounds College, kind of giving you some tips and ideas on how to troubleshoot some networking issues that you might come across and some tips. And again, this is for Windows only because that is what I know. And this is December 13th, 2020. So if anything's changed or gotten better by then or by now, that's great. I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.